Do you know why people stop respecting you, even when you are talented, loyal, and good-hearted? Because the world does not value what is always available. In this ruthless world, constant presence creates familiarity, but strategic absence creates power. Welcome to Career Canvas Power, where transformation becomes your identity. Here, we turn knowledge into real power for your life. In every generation, people misunderstand the nature of power. They believe influence comes from constant visibility, non-stop communication, and endless availability. They think the more they appear before others, the more respected they will become. But history, politics, leadership, and human psychology show a different reality. When something becomes too common, people stop reacting to it with the same intensity. Attention weakens, interest becomes routine, respect slowly loses emotional force. This is why many talented individuals lose their impact over time, not because they lost ability, but because they lost control over their presence. Law 16 from the 48 Laws of Power teaches that absence, when used intelligently, can increase authority, reputation, and symbolic value. Powerful people understand that influence is not only created by appearing before others, it is also created by controlling when, where, and how people experience you. A ruler who appears everywhere becomes ordinary. A leader who speaks endlessly weakens the weight of his words. A person who constantly seeks attention eventually loses the power to command it naturally. This law is not about isolation or arrogance. It is about understanding that human perception changes through timing, distance, and emotional contrast. Strategic absence creates space for reflection. It allows memory, anticipation, and appreciation to develop without constant stimulation. In the world of power, people are often respected not simply because they exist, but because their presence feels meaningful when it appears. Too much circulation makes the price go down. In human relationships, public influence, and social status, constant exposure can reduce perceived importance. When people see someone continuously, hear their opinions every moment, and gain unrestricted access to their presence, emotional intensity gradually decreases. Familiarity replaces distinction. Law 16 teaches that once a person has established reputation and value, temporary withdrawal can strengthen admiration and renew interest. Strategic absence separates an individual from ordinary noise and restores psychological impact to their presence. This principle has been used throughout history by rulers, artists, political figures, and influential leaders who understood the importance of controlled accessibility. They did not allow themselves to become overly familiar to the public, because excessive visibility weakens prestige. The law therefore teaches the importance of timing and restraint. Instead of constantly demanding recognition, powerful people protect their image by limiting unnecessary exposure. They understand that influence is strengthened when presence becomes deliberate rather than automatic. Sometimes leaving at the correct moment creates greater authority than remaining visible without interruption. The central idea behind Law 16 is that human attention weakens when exposure becomes constant and uninterrupted. The human mind is designed to notice change, contrast, and emotional variation, not endless repetition. When people experience the same presence continuously, their reactions slowly become less intense over time. What once felt important starts feeling normal. This psychological pattern affects leaders, celebrities, relationships, social influence, and even personal reputation. A person may still possess talent, intelligence, or authority, yet their impact decreases because others have become too accustomed to their constant availability. Law 16 teaches that strategic withdrawal interrupts this process and restores psychological attention. When distance is created at the correct moment, people begin viewing your presence from a different perspective. Memory becomes active, reflection increases. Appreciation often grows because the mind notices absence more clearly than routine familiarity. Throughout history, powerful rulers understood this principle and carefully controlled access to themselves. They avoided unnecessary visibility because excessive familiarity weakened symbolic authority. Public appearances were limited, formal, and intentional so that each interaction carried emotional and political weight. In modern life, the same principle appears in different forms. Public figures who constantly react to every event often lose seriousness, because their communication becomes predictable and emotionally diluted. In contrast, people who speak selectively usually command greater attention because their words feel measured and purposeful. Law 16 is therefore not simply about disappearing, it is about protecting influence from becoming ordinary. Another important part of this law is emotional perspective. Constant closeness can prevent others from fully recognizing value because there is no pause for evaluation. Temporary distance creates room for reflection and renewed awareness. However, strategic absence only works when genuine value already exists. If a person has not built respect, contribution, skill, or meaningful presence, withdrawal will not increase admiration. It will only reduce relevance. This is why substance must come before strategy. First establish value, then protect it through disciplined visibility. The real lesson of Law 16 is that influence depends not only on presence itself, but also on how carefully that presence is managed over time. The core principle of Law 16 is that emotional perception changes through distance. Human beings do not evaluate people only by logic, they respond according to contrast, interruption, and emotional rhythm. When someone remains continuously present in another person's environment, the mind gradually stops examining that presence with the same level of awareness. Attention becomes automatic instead of intentional. Law 16 teaches that controlled absence can interrupt this psychological routine and force renewed observation. The purpose is not simply to become unavailable, but to prevent your presence from losing distinction through overfamiliarity. Powerful individuals understand that influence grows stronger when appearances feel deliberate rather than constant. They create boundaries around access to themselves because unrestricted familiarity reduces symbolic importance. This principle applies in leadership, politics, public reputation, and social relationships. The less predictable your availability becomes, the more carefully people observe your return. Strategic distance therefore changes not only how often people see you, but how seriously they interpret your presence when you reappear. Law 16 operates through a psychological mechanism connected to imagination and mental projection. When direct access to a person becomes limited, the mind begins filling missing information with interpretation, memory, and speculation. This process increases mental engagement because uncertainty naturally stimulates curiosity. Human beings often think more intensely about what is partially unavailable than about what is fully exposed before them. Constant visibility leaves little room for imagination because everything becomes immediately observable and emotionally processed in real time. Strategic absence changes this dynamic by creating informational and emotional space. During that space, people begin reconstructing their understanding of the absent person through memory and internal reflection. In many situations, this mental reconstruction increases perceived importance, because the mind focuses selectively on strong impressions rather than ordinary familiarity. This is why figures who maintain mystery often appear larger, deeper, or more influential than individuals who constantly reveal themselves without restraint. Law 16 therefore demonstrates that perception is shaped not only by reality itself, but also by what the human mind continues imagining in the absence of complete access. Law 16 is also connected to the principle of scarcity, which strongly influences human judgment and social behavior. Throughout history, scarce objects, limited opportunities, and restricted access have often been treated as more valuable than things that are endlessly available. The same principle affects reputation and authority. When a person becomes excessively accessible, their presence can lose exclusivity and symbolic significance. Powerful leaders historically understood this and carefully managed how frequently people could interact with them. Royal courts, formal ceremonies, and restricted audiences were not only political traditions, they were psychological strategies that preserved prestige and reinforced hierarchy. Limited access increased perceived importance because every appearance carried ceremonial meaning. In modern society, this principle still exists. Individuals who constantly seek visibility often weaken their own image, because repeated exposure removes distinction from their presence. In contrast, people who control access to themselves tend to create stronger anticipation and greater seriousness around their appearances. Scarcity therefore does not create power by itself, but it protects and amplifies value that already exists. Law 16 teaches that influence becomes stronger when presence remains selective, measured, and associated with significance rather than constant repetition. The hidden strategy behind Law 16 is that absence only works after value has already been established. Many people misunderstand this law and assume that disappearing alone will automatically create admiration. In reality, absence has power only when people already recognize significance in the person who withdraws. If no reputation, contribution, or emotional impact exists beforehand, withdrawal produces forgetting instead of fascination. This is why strategic absence must be built on a foundation of substance. First, a person must demonstrate skill, authority, leadership, talent, or meaningful presence. Only after that foundation exists can temporary distance increase appreciation and attention. Powerful individuals understand that influence cannot be created from emptiness. They first build recognition, then protect that recognition from becoming weakened through excessive familiarity. The real strategy is therefore not disappearance itself, but preservation of value. Strategic withdrawal works because it interrupts routine access to something people already consider important. Many rulers, public figures, and celebrities weakened their influence because they failed to control their visibility. At first, constant exposure may create excitement because audiences enjoy easy access and frequent communication. Over time, however, excessive familiarity changes public perception. When people continuously observe every reaction, opinion, and activity of a public figure, emotional intensity begins decreasing. The image loses distinction because nothing remains reserved or elevated. In politics, leaders who speak constantly often weaken the authority of their words, because repeated communication reduces seriousness and anticipation. In entertainment, celebrities who reveal every detail of their private lives frequently lose the sense of intrigue that originally attracted public fascination. Modern social media has accelerated this problem by encouraging non-stop exposure and continuous self-presentation. Many individuals mistake visibility for influence, yet uncontrolled visibility can actually damage long-term prestige. Audiences eventually become emotionally saturated, and attention weakens because nothing feels rare or meaningful anymore. Law 16 teaches that overexposure transforms presence into routine, and routine rarely commands deep respect. The lesson is not to avoid visibility completely, but to understand that influence requires restraint as much as expression. A strong historical example of Law 16 can be seen in Queen Elizabeth I. During her reign, she carefully managed how the public and political elites experienced her presence. Unlike rulers who allowed excessive familiarity, Elizabeth understood the importance of symbolic distance in maintaining authority. Her appearances were controlled, formal, and often ceremonial, which increased the significance attached to each public interaction. Because access to her was limited, people viewed her presence as important rather than ordinary. This strategy strengthened both political influence and public admiration. By avoiding constant exposure, she preserved an image of dignity, control, and elevated status. Her speeches and appearances carried emotional and political weight because they were not endlessly repeated. Elizabeth also understood that mystery could reinforce authority. Rivals found it difficult to fully predict her intentions, while supporters projected strength and intelligence onto her carefully maintained image. Through disciplined visibility, she transformed her presence into a symbol of stability and royal power. Her example demonstrates that strategic distance can protect prestige and increase influence, when combined with established authority and careful timing. The deeper power within Law 16 comes from understanding that influence depends on perception, not only physical presence. People attach greater importance to experiences that feel intentional, limited, and psychologically significant. This is why disciplined visibility can strengthen authority. Another important insight is that emotional rhythm affects attention. Continuous exposure creates mental adjustment, while interruption restores awareness. Powerful individuals therefore manage not only what people see, but also how often people see it. Law 16 also teaches the value of restraint. Those who constantly demand recognition often reveal insecurity, whereas controlled presence creates the impression of confidence and self-possession. Strategic absence can also increase symbolic status because limited accessibility separates a person from ordinary familiarity. Throughout history, influential leaders protected their image carefully so that appearances remained associated with ceremony, seriousness, and meaning. The law ultimately demonstrates that influence grows stronger when presence is measured rather than uncontrolled. Law 16 becomes dangerous when absence turns into neglect, isolation, or poor judgment. Strategic withdrawal requires timing and awareness. Without them, distance can weaken influence instead of strengthening it. If a person disappears for too long, relationships may weaken, opportunities may pass, and public attention may shift elsewhere. Another danger is misunderstanding the purpose of the law. Some individuals attempt to appear mysterious by becoming emotionally unavailable or disconnected from others, but this often creates confusion rather than respect. In leadership, absence during critical moments can damage trust because people expect visibility when responsibility is required. In professional life, excessive withdrawal may reduce credibility if communication and reliability begin disappearing with it. Law 16 therefore does not support permanent distance. Its purpose is controlled visibility, not isolation. The effectiveness of absence depends entirely on whether it creates renewed appreciation or complete disconnection. There are situations where absence can become harmful rather than powerful. If a person's position is weak, their reputation undeveloped, or their role easily replaceable, withdrawal may reduce relevance instead of increasing respect. Visibility is often necessary during the early stages of influence because recognition must exist before absence can have psychological effect. A leader who has not yet earned authority cannot rely on distance to create prestige. Similarly, individuals working in highly competitive environments may lose opportunities if they withdraw before establishing clear value. Law 16 therefore requires balance and situational awareness. Presence builds recognition, while selective absence protects significance after recognition has been achieved. The true mastery of this law lies in understanding timing. Wise individuals know when visibility strengthens influence and when restraint preserves it. They adapt their presence according to context instead of applying one strategy blindly in every situation. The practical application of Law 16 begins with controlling unnecessary exposure in daily life. Avoid making every thought, emotion, and activity constantly available to others. Excessive accessibility can reduce seriousness because people stop associating your presence with intention or value. Learn to create boundaries around time, communication, and attention. In professional settings, allow work and results to establish credibility instead of constantly seeking recognition. In conversations, speak with purpose rather than filling every silence unnecessarily. On social media, avoid endless self-exposure because constant visibility often weakens personal distinction over time. Strategic restraint can also improve leadership by ensuring that appearances, decisions, and communication carry greater weight. Law 16 teaches that influence is strengthened when presence remains disciplined, deliberate, and connected to meaning rather than constant repetition. Law 16 teaches that human perception changes through familiarity, timing, and controlled accessibility. Constant exposure can gradually reduce emotional intensity because the mind adapts to uninterrupted presence. Strategic absence interrupts this process by restoring attention, reflection, and appreciation. However, the law is not about disappearing completely or avoiding connection with others. Its true purpose is the intelligent management of visibility. Powerful individuals throughout history understood that prestige and authority weaken when presence becomes overly familiar. At the same time, absence without established value creates irrelevance instead of admiration. This is why balance is essential. First build substance, reputation, and meaningful contribution. Then protect that value through disciplined visibility and careful timing. The central lesson of Law 16 is that influence depends not only on being seen, but on ensuring that your presence continues to feel significant whenever it appears. Thank you. Remember, real power comes from understanding and applying. Stay connected with Career Canvas Power, your transformation continues.